It's a brand new weekend because it's 1 p.m. It's time to do 55 minutes of business right here on Business Incorporated. Here's what we have prepared for you on this episode of the program. Well, down tool going on in different states in Nigeria, but what's it costing the economy? We'll discuss that on Business Incorporated today. And in the financial sector, Heritage Bank PLC has had its license revoked by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Inflation numbers for April in Kenya, it's up slightly, but it's still growing. Good afternoon. Welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Amy John McQuarrie. We head straight into business, beginning from the global space. Oil prices fell early Monday despite a move by producer group OPEC Plus to extend deep output cuts well into 2025. Brent futures for August delivery were down 24 cents. That's about 0.3% to $80.87 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures for July delivery was also down 19 cents, that's of 0.25% to $76.80 a barrel. OPEC Plus is currently cutting output by a total of 5.86 million barrels every day. That's about 5.7% of global demand. And this includes 3.66 million barrels of cuts that were due to expire at the end of 2024 and voluntary cuts by 8 members of 2.2 million barrels per day to expire by the end of June 2024. But on Sunday, that's yesterday, the group agreed to extend the cuts of 3.66 million barrels per day by a year until the end of 2025. It will also prolong the cuts of 2.2 million barrels per day by 3 months until the end of September 2024 before phasing it out over a year from October 2024 to September 2025. We head to the metal space now, where gold prices were a little changed on Monday as traders await more U.S. data this week after recent data showed that inflation stabilized and lifted hopes for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates later on this year. Spot gold, looking at the numbers now, almost unchanged, awaiting those numbers obviously at $2,322.53 per ounce. U.S. gold futures was down 0.1%. $2,342.70. Investors will look at the Institution of Supply Management nationwide PMI, which is expected later on today. Wednesday's ADP employment report and non-farm payrolls data due on Friday. These will gauge the U.S. economy's health and if it will deter the Fed from cutting rates in September. Other metals now, spot silver fell 0.8% to $30.12 per ounce. Platinum was up 0.3%, $1,040.80, and palladium lost 0.5% to $908.19. We come to Nigeria, where the Central Bank of Nigeria has revoked the banking license of Heritage Bank PLC, and this is in accordance with its mandate to promote a sound financial system in Nigeria and an exercise of its powers under the Section 12 of the Banks and Other Financial Acts, that's BOFIA. According to a statement signed by the Acting Director of Corporate Communications, Mrs. Hakama Sidi Ali, this action has become necessary because the board and management of the bank have not been able to improve the bank's financial performance, a situation which constitutes a threat to financial stability. This follows a period of during which the central bank engaged with the bank and prescribed various supervisory steps intended to stem the decline. Regrettably, the bank has continued to suffer and has no reasonable prospects of recovery, thereby making the revocation of the license the next necessary step. The Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation, the NDIC, has been appointed as the liquidator of the bank in accordance with the section that already has been mentioned as Section 12. And the CBN assures the public that the Nigerian financial system remains on a solid footing. Meanwhile, investors' sentiment is being gauged with this liquidation of Heritage Bank assets by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Finance expert Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed believes that this move by the CBN will keep the banking sector sound, and he spoke with Lad Williams earlier today during Business Morning.
I think it has been expected for a while now. I remember there were like 2-3 years ago, the foreman that then the then CBN governor came to debunk it, that said the bank was going into crisis. That's a bank that had been shown in a lot of controversy. If you remember that the chairman of that bank also was removed some time ago, and I think the bank has not really come out of its wood. But the good thing is that CBN is intervening. We'll get more information on what those interventions are, because sometimes when this intervention comes into play, sometimes the more you see, the less you understand. And there are a good thing about the Heritage Bank thing, Ladi, is that it's not listed in the stock exchange. Investors will not suffer losses like they will normally suffer when licenses are revoked, because the CBN will say we are only interested in customers, and once you're an investor, your money has gone down the drain.
Well, that's one hot story. The other is the down tool by NLC and NTUC, the National Union of Banks, Insurance and Financial Institutions employees have asked financial institution workers to comply with the Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress indefinite strike begins today, June the 3rd. The instruction was issued in a statement signed by Mohammed Ishvaku Shekig, that's the General Secretary of the body. However, when our reporters took a walk around some of the states, most branches were found in Lagos. It's a mixed bag for compliance. While some banks in Lagos are shut, others are not. However, in Rivers State, banks are shut. Kaduna State, it's also shut down. Most banks in Ogun, however, open at this time in spite of this call for a down tool. And earlier today, Business Morning, we did have a conversation with NECA, that's the Employers Association. We have the DG sharing his thoughts on the down tool.
Now, what we are meant to recommend is a national minimum wage. It's very important to address that. The minimum wage below which no organization, either in the private or public sector, should pay. The wage ordinarily for the most vulnerable worker. It is not, the process is not to set a general wage increase. It is not. There has been conversations about living wage or there's no living wage. This particular committee that we have, it's set up to come up with recommendations for a new minimum wage. And for us, one of the key objectives is that you must protect jobs. Because if organized businesses continue to suffer the current situation, look, there's no way we can protect jobs. That is the basic reality of it. There's no way businesses can remain sustainable when their affordability becomes in question.
So for employers, it's protection of jobs. For the labor unions, it's about the realities, economic realities. And of course, for state governments, is the ability to be able to pay this amount, a whole lot there. But all of it is being felt by the economy, being felt. Even the down tool, of course, is costing the economy something. Let's delve into this with Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Muda Yusuf is here as the Chief Executive Officer of CPPE, and he's right here in the studio. Dr. Yusuf, good afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, how was the road on your way here? I mean,
the road was free, and there's an indication.
Does that mean there's less activity on the road?
Exactly.
So that means, I mean, people are really complying with this.
Well, people are complying. That is the implication, and you know, you have an atmosphere of uncertainty. You don't know how bad or how good it will be. So people, I think, are being cautious, you know, in terms of going out and all of that. And when you begin to read stories about some pockets of protests here and there, so I think that is why many people are staying back.
But I think so far it's been peaceful. where there's, I learned, for instance, the Lagos government office allows the union are there. They stopped workers from going in at the airport and all of that. But basically, I think it's been peaceful. I haven't heard of any.
Yeah, it has been peaceful, but it has been very disruptive. Because, I mean, people have their plans for the week. You know, businesses, conferences, travels. I mean, look at what has happened to the aviation sector, for instance. The flights, no flights could fly because people could not have access. Whether you are a crew member, whether you're a passenger, you couldn't get access to the airport. You know, and there are quite a number of economic activities that have been so disrupted. And of course, what is even more disturbing is the fact that the national grid was shut down.
It's shut down. I think it's still shut down.
Yeah. Now, I think that is disproportionate in my view, because it's good to also be measured when we talk about things like this. You know, going to the extent of shutting down the national grid, I think, for me, it borders on the extreme. It's a bit disproportionate to what we are dealing with. Because when we are talking about national minimum wage, we should also recognize that close to 80% of Nigerians are not covered by this whole issue of national minimum wage. A lot of people, SMEs, informal sector, all of them, they are on their own. Even if you get the national minimum wage, it doesn't mean so much to them. Yes, we know that the wages are low, our purchasing power is weak, but we also need to, you know, draw the line and know that there are also other players in the economy, other citizens, who don't fall into the category of those who will benefit from the national minimum wage.
And yet there are some Nigerians that are affected by this, which is why I was talking about finding a balance.
Exactly.
You know, so the workers there, NECA, are saying they want to protect jobs. I mean, we're talking of the issue of unemployment in the country. And the union members themselves are saying, well, I mean, we know what inflation is saying now compared to the last time we had 30,000. Even, you know, the other buffer that the federal government brought about 35,000 naira, how many people really get it? And yet, the state governments are also saying, can we really afford to pay 496,000 naira every month to every worker? And this is supposed to be the minimum for workers in the country. How do we find a balance with this?
Well, we can find a balance through negotiation. I mean, that is the only option. Because this idea of possibly intimidating one party over the other or disrupting the entire economy.
You think this is disruption or intimidation?
No, it's very disruptive. I mean, how can you shut down the national grid? There's even the issue of legality about it, in fairness. Because I think there's a provision in the Labour Act or something that says that essential services should not be tampered with in the event of a strike. It's a national security issue. We are discussing minimum wage, then you shut down the entire national grid. I don't think that is right. We need to interrogate that, because no matter what we do, we should do it within the ambit of the law. There's a law that guides even strikes, labor actions, and so on and so forth. There are so many other citizens in this country. Not all of us are workers. Not all of us are salary earners. Almost 80% of the citizens are outside all this conversation. How do you now go and shut down the national grid?
But what
I think they need to be more measured, okay, you know, in the action that they take.
So, Dr. Yusuf, where would you say they should meet? Still finding a balance now. The two parties are working with different principles. One is working with the principles of economic realities. The other one is working with the economies of ability to pay. But when we look at it, the naira, of course, has lost value. Inflation is not what it used to be about a year ago. Not to mention, I think it was 2019 that it was increased to 30,000. Where do you think the balance should be in the value now, in the amount that you think should be a minimum wage?
The point is that you can't give what you don't have. So the starting point is affordability. Can these employers, can they afford it? Because we are talking of national minimum wage. It's not just only about the federal. It's about the states, it's about local government, it's about the private sector. Many SMEs are struggling, even as business owners. They are declaring losses. Some business owners are borrowing to pay salaries as we speak. Some of them are recruiting only people who stay close to their places of work because of the challenges of transportation cost. So we are all in this together. Whether you are an employee, whether you are an employer, we are facing the heat together. So that is why we have to be reasonable, and we have to situate this within the context of affordability, the context of sustainability, and the context of equity. There are some states, as we speak now, they spend over 80% of their resources on the payment of salaries. So is it only the civil servants in the states that should be consuming 80% of the resources? What happens to other citizens of the state? What happens to infrastructure? What happens to education? What happens to health? What happens to the environment? What happens to transportation in the state? So the resources is not only for workers. Of course, workers are very critical, but we need to also be equitable. There are people who are not workers, who are also citizens, who are entitled to benefit from the resources of government. So there has to be reasonableness on all parts.
What's the reasonable number for you?
Well, it is difficult to say, but maybe around 100,000 or something, maybe that may sound reasonable. But another issue is that many of these state governments, they have a bloated bureaucracy. The staff strengths are much more than what they need. So the option that may be open to some employers is to sack workers. Because for some of them, some of these states and local governments, they can make do with even 50% of their current staff strength. And the work will still go on. So they have that issue at all levels of government. The size of their workforce is extremely very large. That is why they are struggling with all this minimum wage. And this minimum wage is not just about paying the minimum. It's about what they call consequential adjustment. Apart from paying the minimum, you have to adjust for all other salary levels. So the implication is quite huge.
But you also have to look at it from the part of the unions. I mean, there was a tripartite committee that was formed. They've been in talks. And it just seems, I mean, the difference is really so much that we don't know where compromise should come from. Government is saying 60,000. Labour is saying 496, I think 495 or 96,000, So, and for the union, they've been having talks, but the talks doesn't seem to be making headway. So what should they be doing? What could they be doing within, as you said, the ambit of the law?
Well, what they should be, there is no alternative to negotiation. But in the negotiation process, you also have to be realistic. It's not about what should be the living wage or what is convenient or what is desirable. It's about what is realistic. It's about what can be paid. And it's about also other measures to bring down the cost of living. Because this is not just about salary. It's about the totality of economic management to bring down the cost of living, the cost of food, the cost of transportation. And I think there is a proposal at the presidency now that is addressing the issue of inflation reduction and price stability. It's an executive order. I saw a draft of it. I don't know whether it has been approved. But it's about some very practical measures to bring down the cost of food.
I believe that's from the Taiwo Yedele report.
Yes, I think it's part of the recommendation from the Taiwo Yedele to the president. And it's going to come as an executive order. These are some of the issues that should form part of the conversation. Because if we take the salary today and the inflation begins to rise again, within the next 1 or 2 years, you come back to square one.
And I'm talking about inflation. There's the argument that automatically an increase in salaries will feed into inflation. But I mean, there are also some dissenting voices that do not agree with that. I think in Brazil, some people noted some of those examples. In a country like Brazil, there was increase in wages. We didn't see it lead to an increase in inflation. I think also China, a couple of countries like that. So when we look at our trend, in Nigeria, because Nigeria were very different and special. Do we see increase in minimum wage or salaries leading to feeding into inflation?
Not necessarily. Even if we have an impact, again, we have to relate to data. How much will it come to? What proportion of that will be the proportion of money supply, for instance? Money supply in the economy now, I think, is around 52 trillion. So how much will this be, and how much impact? So unless you have data, you may not be able to say categorically the effect it will have on inflation. But naturally, it will increase the demand, it will increase money supply, and it will have some inflationary implication. But it may not be that profound when you look at it within the context of the totality of the economy. I think that is very important.
On the other hand, it could also boost production, increases demand, could also boost production.
Yes, it could boost production, but there's also this psychological element, especially around our markets. Once there's the news that salaries have increased, they will also immediately also increase their prices, because they feel that that is the only way they can also get a share of the increase in salary. So there is that psychological effect on pricing, that prices have increased, you now have more money, I need to get my own share from that. Mm-hmm. So that is also inflationary in a way.
Yes, so as we conclude now, the airports are shut down. Most airports are shut down. This is a major one so far. Some banks are shut down. All of this, of course, is a cost to the economy. If this enters day 2, Dr. Muda, what do you see as a cost to the economy?
No, it's a major cost to the economy. This is affecting costs. I mean, now, since morning, since 12 a.m. or so, nobody has access to power supply. People have been running on diesel. People have been running on petrol. That is cost. That is productivity. Some people can't go to work. People have conferences that have been cancelled, hotels booking that have been cancelled, and all of that. The airlines that cannot. These are costs on the economy. So the cost in terms of productivity, in terms of output, is enormous. It's enormous. So the earlier we resolve this matter, the better, but we need to be realistic on all sides. And we don't have to cripple the economy because of this matter. Because the economy is not only about workers. There are also other stakeholders in the economy who also have the right, as citizens, to continue to do their businesses.
All right, we do hope that this is resolved, especially with the power. I mean, when you think of the diesel, I think they said diesel about 1,002 now, and then you have to pay extra, buy extra for that. It's a whole lot.
And the security implication. I mean, how do you shut down national grid? That is a major thing. It's major.
All right, Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you so much for your time and your views this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll head to the markets, but there are also other issues going on. And right here, we'll bring it to you on Business Incorporated. To join us again. Welcome back to watching Business Incorporated right here on Channels Television. We'll head to the market now, but for our DSTV viewers, you're heading to Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, where there's the commissioning of the expansion of the Inter-Southern Expressway from the Villa roundabout to Ossex Ring Road 1 junction. I'm told that this is going to ease a lot of movement for residents or road users in Abuja. Some of those roundabouts, you just have a straight drive from the Villa roundabout to Ossex Ring Road building. So we'll head there. That's for DSTV, but we'll continue Business Incorporated on our other platforms, as our local platform and our Channel 24 UK platform. So our DSTV viewers, head to Abuja. Now let's head to the market. For the rest of us, with Anyete Edet, the numbers looked good. I think some kind of magic happened at the NGX, Anyete, at the last week of May at the NGX, because we had 3 weeks of negative, and yet just 5 days of positive trade cancelled all those negative for the 3 weeks.
Well, I'm very much surprised because, of course, we're all used to that popular slogan, the market slogan of sell me and go away. And like you rightly said, three consecutive sessions of negative trading. And of course, we didn't have any public holiday besides the May 1st holiday, which was the only holiday. But besides that, we're quite interesting to know that it was the banking counter as well as the oil and
It's
gas.
always the banking counter. If the market is in the red, it's the bank, because it's the most liquid counter.
It's the most liquid. And not to mention that they're also trying to raise money. There's so many of them are talking about capital raisings. So
yeah, and I believe the banking counter would not be so much affected by this Heritage Bank, the revoke of their license, because I think for a bit before now they haven't been very active, and even this was already priced in long before now, obviously.
It's priced in. Well, it's quite interesting to know that first, Heritage Bank is not listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Okay. And,
so it doesn't really, because the central bank, I think, had to emphasize the fact that it does not measure the stability or non-stability of the banking sector at this time. I mean, Heritage Bank. So that people don't get scared, that, oh, now you have a bank that is not existing. And also, all depositors' funds are already insured by the NDIC. So, I mean, exactly. And they are the ones that are liquidating it now. So they should be able to take care of every depositor's fund.
Exactly. And of course, we'll be talking to someone in the equities market who also is in the banking sector. So he'll be giving us more details about the banking sector at intraday, as well as to give us a review of the month of May, why all of that happened. So let's talk to our viewers first all around the world for intraday market analysis. Nigeria stock market, we closed that last week. Week to date, the market was up by 1.73%. Month to date, that's for the month of May, it was up by 1.1%, while year to date, 32.9%. But on your board here, we still see the markets still trying to climb back to that 100,000 points, which it had lost some couple of weeks ago. So it's still struggling a little bit. We talked about the markets making that comeback away from the loss that we saw in the month of April. The market was down by 6.16% and losing 3.5 trillion naira. But for the month of May, it made a rebound, gaining about 619 billion naira. And this is coming after the month that the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank had hiked interest rate to about 24.75%, which made investors within the equities market to move their portfolio into the fixed income market. So that's it for Nigeria stock market. Now for the South African stock market, almost 1% and gradually climbing above the 77,000 points at 77,424.06 points. Over to the Egyptian stock exchange, the EGX 30, we see the market also in the green. So it's mostly a positive sentiment for major markets for Africa at intraday. Now let's talk to our market analyst, Abiodun Adedotun, equity trader at FBN Quest, for more details about the stock market, particularly reviewing the month of May, where we saw that comeback. Thank you for joining us, Abiodun.
Thank you very much, Victor. Okay. It's nice to be here again.
Okay, and happy new month to you. Now,
happy new month.
All right, so let's talk stocks, or let's take stock. Our stock market, Nigeria stock market, we see that. Were you surprised that the market had that last minute or last week rebound after 3 consecutive sessions of profit taking?
I'm not really. I wasn't surprised because the valuation levels are quite very, very attractive for investors to get in. I think the market was overflogged, especially the banking stocks. They were overflogged towards the middle of the month of May. So it's more like cherry picking to try to bring the market back to reasonable levels.
Okay, now we've talked much about the banking stocks, but what about the consumer goods counter, where we've seen about 10 months now, we've seen so much, some are listed and some are not listed. What's happening to the consumer goods counter of the NGX?
It's actually a mixed story in the consumer space. For companies that have exposure to FX, like Nestle, Nigerian breweries, Of course, the FX story is well known all across the nation. Our currency has taken a big hit. So it's not really looking good on the FX side of things for them. For the locals that depend mostly on the local production, maybe like your NASCON and Co., they fared a little bit better. But as you would agree with me, most of the input for these consumers are imported. So there's been a bit of pass through in terms of cost uh, to their operations, and that's not really looking well. So margins are being eroded, and of course, a little bit of capital injection has to come in. We know about the Nigerian breweries trying to raise capital up to 600 billion. Nestle is also has also tried to adjust the balance sheet to be able to reflect the true realities of state of affairs. So pretty much it's a bit of mixed among the consumer goods.
Okay, so now we're starting the first trading day of June today. So how is the market looking at that intraday, and what's your outlook for the first trading week of June?
Right now, the market, there's a bit of profit taking happening in the market as I speak to you right now. Of course, day traders are trying to take advantage of the higher prices, which was printed at close of Friday, to be able to book lock-in profits. And of course, demand is a bit weaker, but you'd expect that the market might just trade around these current levels or roll back a bit. But the good thing there is that we might get some form of, relief given the performance you expect a settler to do on the news of the ExxonMobil deal going through upon approval by the NNPC. So I think that should play more. Investors should look more at a company like that and might be able to give the market some kind of stability.
Okay, Abiodun, I think we'll leave it there for the market, and of course, look out for how the market ends the first trading week of June. Most likely, the bulls should have it. So thank you so much for your time on our show.
Yeah.
I was Abiodun Adedotun, equity trader at FBN Quest, with the intraday market numbers for the equities market. Now let's move over to the Middle East. For the regional indexes, there is a positive move across board there, starting first with the United Arab Emirates, where we see both of the counters there, the Abu Dhabi index as well as the Dubai FM index, both on the United Arab Emirates in the green. And then moving over to Saudi Arabia, where we see the Tadawul, that's the region's biggest market there, where we see a 1.59% whopping gain there on the day that the state oil giants Aramco, which is also the world's largest oil company in terms of both crude production and market cap. So it's conducting its second IPO, initial public offering. That's to retail investors. It began actually yesterday, but then it's continuing and will continue until June the 5th. So, the company is seeking to raise about $12 billion. So that is part of what is revving up this market, because that company is listed on the Tadawul, which is the Saudi Arabia Stock Exchange Index. Now we also see for the Qatar about 0.25% in the green at intraday. So that's it for the markets around the Middle East. And then let's move over to the United States, the world's biggest economy, where we see the month of May, it ended slightly mixed for the US market, but for the start of June, we're seeing a kind of a mixed picture. For the Nasdaq, we see a pullback there. For the S&P 500, we see a slight green there, 0.14%, while for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, we see a 0.09% decline, where you see on your board there, the shares of NVIDIA, which has been dominating headlines last week, the shares, it ticked higher in the pre-market session, but as of last week, the market, that share was down, although it has climbed over the $1,100 mark. And then the main index are coming off a strong month of May, with all the three notching their sixth positive performance out of 7 sessions. So over to the Asia market, which is the final one that we're tracking, we see mostly positive sentiments. And this is because two-pronged approach. on one side, India's market, we do not track the India's market, but many of the markets are tracking India's market, and that comes at a time when the country is holding its election and expecting that Narendra Modi, that's the country's prime minister, would win elections there, and the market is pricing that already. We'll see all the counters in the green, 1.13% for the Nikkei. The Nikkei 225 for South Korea's Kospi, we see 1.74%, and for the Hang Seng Index of Hong Kong, 1.79%. Now over to China, where we see the China's PMI, that's the manufacturing index, the PMI Purchasing Managers Index, rising to about 51.7 in May, all the way from 51.4, and the 50 points mark is a benchmark which shows if it falls below 50 points, it means that the manufacturing is not doing very well. But if it's above the 50 points level, it's an indicator of a positive manufacturing sentiment for any country. So PMI is what you use to track most of the performance of the manufacturing of countries. So that's it for the markets. And also in Australia, we see the S&P 200 adding about 0.77% to close at 77,761 points. They're up by 0.77%, but Shanghai's index was in the red. So that's the markets at intraday and for the close of Monday for some markets in Asia.
Thank you so much, Anita.
Pleasure.
All right, now let's head to UK and see what's going on there. There's been a bill that's been passed into law today, and that is the Digital Market Competition and Consumers Bill passed into law. It's supposed to affect the operations of tech companies. We have Juliana joining us now to tell us the implication, what to expect. Hi, Juliana. Good afternoon. So how does this affect the operations of tech companies?
Good afternoon, Ini. That remains to be seen, but certainly I think the lots of publishers within the digital space are really excited. Hello, Ini. Just confirming you can hear me, Ini.
I can hear you, Juliana. All right. Looks, I don't know, I think we're having a bit of a technical
Any, you can hear me, even though I can't hear you, Any. Okay, right. So the Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Bill has been put in because we know that the digital space has been dominated by a few major players over the past couple of years. And there's actually a really famous case in Australia where the government and regulators weren't happy about Facebook taking certain news, publishing it on their side. But basically, it was seen as this was stifling competition. So a new piece of legislation has been put in place, as you said, and what it will allow in the UK is the Competition and Markets Authority to create a digital unit which will allow certain powers to ensure that consumers are well informed, consumers are not just forced by these big tech companies to consume only their content or their products without having a fair share of what is on offer. So for some people, this has been a long time in the coming. There are going to be practices that are put in place. I believe there is going to be a strategic market status put on particular big multinational companies that have digital platforms to ensure that they aren't stifling competition and that they are being transparent and fair with customers. So, of course, lots of the detail is still being consulted, but I think it is a good step because we know, I suppose all of us can think of just 1, 2 or 3 major tech companies that kind of control everything you do, how you use your phone, what apps you use, whether or not you use fitness trackers. So this law is going to be put in place to prevent us being bombarded by only 2 or 3 and that the market is fully accessible.
Yeah, sounds interesting. They're protecting the rights of the consumers again. But other than that, looking ahead at the week, what data are we expecting?
Pretty quiet week in terms of economic data coming out of the Office for National Statistics. I do believe on Wednesday, perhaps there is going to be data looking at new car sales that will be coming from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. I believe we are getting housing data on Friday from the Halifax. But of course, in the UK, the big story is about the UK general election. We are going to the ballot on July the 4th, so in just little over a month. Both of the two main party leaders are up and down the country trying to convince voters that they should be the next Prime Minister, as we've discussed, I think, possibly over the past year, Inni. The leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, is, head and shoulders above Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to attain the keys to number 10 Downing Street. Although the campaign hasn't been that swimmingly over the past couple of days, we discussed last week on Channel's Business Global that a stalwart MP, Diane Abbott, the first black member of Parliament, was banned from running for the Labour Party. She's now confirmed that she isn't banned from running. So that kind of shifted focus. But Sir Keir Starmer today has been speaking about defence spending, which has always been an Achilles heel for the left, because there are some suggestions that perhaps, they don't want to bolster defence spending in the UK, which we know is really necessary at the moment, considering it is a very dicey situation in Europe and across the Middle East. In fact, the Prime Minister has said the next 5 years are going to be some of the most dangerous years that Britain has faced in the past 30 years. So yes, every conversation in the UK at the moment is on the election. No data from the Office for National Statistics, but of course there'll be company updates and any other topics that are economically affected we'll be updating you with, Vinay.
Yeah, and I wonder how investors are preparing and taking position ahead of the elections.
It's a good question. Very, very good question. The FTSE All Share is actually in the green at intraday. A lot of people have suggested that, a Labour Party would bankrupt Britain. And they're saying that, Rishi Sunak does have all the credentials to ensure that this country is on the path to economic stability. However, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, is very well endorsed. She has had endorsement from the city as well as the former Bank of England Governor, Mark Carney. So even if there is a prospect of a Labour government, it does appear as if at the moment the city would be pretty pleased with the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But if we have a closer look at the numbers, the All Share and intraday, it's up by 0.33%. The FTSE 100, the blue chip, that's up by 0.24%. And the FTSE 250, the domestic market, that's up by 0.80% at intraday, Inni. In the currencies market, the British pound is currently trading down against the US dollar by 0.29%, down 2 against the euro by 0.08%, and down against the Japanese yen by 0.49% at intraday.
All right, Juliana, thank you so much. Very busy days ahead as we count down to that election in July.
All right. Thank you.
Well, now let's head to Berlin, where in the EU generally, credit rating agency S&P has cut France's credit rating, and they say they are concerned about the trajectory of French government debts. Chip Bola joins us now to give us details. Hi, Chip. Good afternoon. So, how's this going to affect other countries?
A- from AA, and it points to the budget deficit of the EU's second largest economy as the main reason. And while it expects France's economic recovery to continue, S&P says government debt levels will remain elevated. The good news for France is that the rating agency is keeping its outlook stable. Now, the timing of this rating downgrade couldn't be worse. S&P made the announcement just over a week to the EU Parliament elections, which are taking place from June 6 to June 9. French President Macron's Renaissance group is trailing the far-right RN in the polls. So this news has provided opposition parties an opportunity to tout their economic proposals. For its part, the French government blames the rise in government debt on its spending to support businesses and households during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right, I hope that's not affecting the market negatively for the region.
Well, European stocks are expected to trade slightly higher today, and that will be coming off the back of a stellar Asian market session. Investors are shrugging off concerns about the latest EU inflation figures. Data released Friday showed that the EU's inflation rose for the first time this year to 2.6% in May. And until April, the bloc's inflation was falling towards the European Central Bank's target inflation of 2%. Still, investors expect the ECB to cut borrowing rates from the record of 4% this Thursday. That would put, of course, the Eurozone on a divergent monetary policy path from the US. And investors will also be keeping an eye on the International Airline Association IATA's meeting in Dubai. The heads of around 150 airlines will be discussing the aviation sector, which is slowing down after a post-pandemic resurgence.
All right, Chiponda, thank you so much. We'll also be following up with that IATA meeting. Now, let's talk about small businesses. Last week, there was a launch. The Financial Reporting Council launched the Corporate Governance Guidelines for Small and Medium Enterprises. And they did that, or they're working on that alongside the Convention on Business Integrity. So we have the Director of Programs for Convention on Business Integrity joining us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Emmanuel Bosa joins us to tell us more about this Corporate Governance Guideline for Small Businesses. Good afternoon, Mr. Bosa, and thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
So first of all, we'd like to know the essence of all of this, because, I mean, when you talk about small businesses, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the issue of funding. So now you're talking of corporate governance guidelines, and I'm wondering, how does that help small businesses?
I think that's a very important question. As we start, let me start by saying that the corporate governance guidelines is launched. It was launched last Friday. It's been in the works for the past 12 months, working in partnership with the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, which is the agency responsible for obviously improving and implementing corporate governance in Nigeria, and also done in partnership with the United Nations Global Compact. So specifically, why is it relevant? It's important for the SME sector for the reason you mentioned. The harsh economic reality in which SMEs operate mean that it's important for them to identify ways of improving their governance and make them viable as businesses. So how do they also manage risk? How do they respond to the current environment in which they are struggling to access cash, to access finance, to be able to do their businesses? So the governance guidelines create a set of standards that enables them to be able to identify ways of improving their businesses, but also managing their businesses in a way that is risk-based. So identifies risks, manages risks, prepares them to be able to get, whether it's investor credit, whether it's improving their operations, whether it's responding to risks that could damage their reputation or the way they operate in the markets in which they operate, and in ways they also expect.
Unfortunately, I think we have a little bit of technical hitch right there with Mr. Bosa. I do hope we could get him back, and especially at this time where the issue of climate change seems to be inculcated, into the issue of funding, the need for funding, the request for funding. It's also being joined there. Mr. Bosa, I see you're back. Do you want to complete your thought? But I'm very curious about the issue of climate change and funding. It seems that's also becoming a requirement, if you want to access fund, and even talking about corporate governance.
Absolutely. Talking about climate change, it's a bit high level for some SMEs because we're trying to cover SMEs across the spectrum. So whether it's nano, micro, small, and then you talk about the medium. So essentially, in terms of accessing climate change fund, it goes back to the same thing. During the launch last week, the Executive Secretary of the Financial Reporting Council made a very important point, which is this. The issue of finance is not the fundamental challenge faced by SMEs. The issue of governance that enables them to tap into that financing is the main problem. So if you don't have the books that demonstrate that you've been paying tax as a corporate citizen, if you do not have the governance rules that enables you to hire the right kind of staff, if you don't have the governance rules to ensure that if a company wants to invest in you or in governance practices, that enables that when companies want to invest in you, they see that you have a track record how you do business, that in itself creates risk. So before we come to issues of ESG, environmental, social, and governance around climate change, a lot of businesses need to, first of all, build the foundations to ensure that they're functioning well. And then, of course, as part of that arrangement, take into account the importance of the economic, the social, the environmental, and the governance considerations, and then make sure that they're strong enough to be able to tap into the funding that they require. And that's what this guidelines is designed to address. Even as much as how do you plan for succession? When it's a family-owned business and you have the owner-operator about to transition out and have the next layer in, how do you manage that transition? How do you make sure that you have the rules in place, you have a board?
All right, I think we just have to end it there, unfortunately, with Mr. Emmanuel Bosa, the Program Director of Convention on Business Integrity, telling us about that corporate governance guideline for SMEs, small businesses. It's obviously a conversation we'll have to take up another time. Before we head to the crypto space, we have to go to Kenya now, where the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics released its latest report detailing the changes in its average retail prices. Well, the summary of it is that inflation in that country has gone from 5.0% to 5.1% for the month of May. And major drivers of that is food, tomatoes, majorly. There are also non-food items, but most of that is reflected in the price of food items. And then we go to the aviation sector now, where the International Air Transport Association has said that about $19 million belonging to foreign airlines operating in Nigeria is still being tracked with the Central Bank of Nigeria. This is after the Central Bank has cleared about 98% of the owed funds, and this was as at April 2024. The Director General of IATA, Mr. Willie Walsh, disclosed this at the World Media Conference, which is ongoing right now at Dubai. Of course, we'll get more stories from this in the coming days, but let's just rush over to the crypto space and see what's happening there. Yeah, I thought Ladi would be running in because I know you're almost out of time.
Yeah, definitely out of time, but it's green on screen at this point, and some data showing that regionally and globally, we're seeing that Nigeria is second place when it comes to interest in Bitcoin. And when you come to Nigeria, checking out the states, we see Delta State is leading right now when it comes to interest in Bitcoin, and that's according to Google Trends. See that Bitcoin interest by region, El Salvador is leading in number 1, Nigeria in number 2, and then by states in Nigeria, we see Delta State topping the counter there, then Edo State and Bayelsa. Let's bring in Olumide Additional now, financial market analyst. Olumide, great to have you.
Yeah, great to have me, Ladi. Good afternoon.
Yeah, so we're seeing Nigeria second, despite the regulatory crackdown we've seen on the P2P market and other issues, but we still see big interest with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think primarily Nigeria's young, vibrant population brings the credence to the crypto awareness, and knowing fully well that this is Africa's biggest crypto market. The number has been at that place since 2 years ago. I think before El Salvador took up the Bitcoin space, Nigeria used to be the highest. So despite the clampdown, interest in Bitcoin is very high. And if you look at it in Nigeria, the interest is strongest in the south-south, where Delta, Edo, and areas like Anambra and the southeast take lion's share of the interest. Surprisingly, Lagos is not even in the first 15, and that pretty much tells you that the banking infrastructure in Lagos gives a lot of residents at that place many options. So we are seeing interest in the crypto market despite the clampdown by the president's global administration on P2P trading.
Right, definitely, and that's for 1 year. We'll see how the trend, continues going forward right here. But thank you so much, Olumide Additional.
Thank you for having me.
So there you have it, in Delta State topping the list there when it comes to interest with Bitcoin, according to Google Trends. So a lot of people in Delta State are interested in Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I hope we'll not have to relocate to Delta State because just bringing it out into the news like this does something to our viewers' decisions and all of that. Or perhaps we'll see the government looking at Delta State even more now.
Maybe. We'll definitely see.
I hope you haven't put them in trouble, Adi. All right, so that's it on the program. It's just Monday. We have 4 more days to go. That means a whole lot of information ahead of you. But do remember, you can always repeat this experience when you go to our YouTube channel and watch the program. I'm Ini John Merko. I'll see you for the stock market report at 10 p.m. and I'll see you tomorrow.